Welcome to the latest episode of River Thoughts, and today I'm not just with Peter, but we have some guests. Just to say that as the latest episode, if you're fairly new to this, then it's under the auspices of Camborne Cluster of Churches, and the idea is to facilitate open discussion about topics that people of faith, no faith or questioning faith might just come along and tap into or be part of, actually, as is the case today. And we take topical and important issues and just try to view it in order that we increase our own knowledge through the discussions we have and somehow grow in personal life ourselves at the same time. These happen weekly. There are every week for about 20 minutes, although they do vary a bit. And the format is different, sometimes a bit autobiographical or biographical, sometimes a group, sometimes just Peter and I, who you'll see on the camera in a minute if he hasn't already put his face up on there. And the whole idea of this is to pick a different topic, and today's topic is land, its use, how it's distributed amongst people, and do we own it or not, as a question. So we're going to look at all of those things. And just to set the context for this, and I've got a couple of scribbled notes here, and for the benefit of my guests that I'll introduce in a minute, the reason I've got so fascinated by this topic is because about 7 years ago, I think, something like that, I realised that Anne and I didn't own a house, which we didn't at the time, and neither of our children owned a house, and one of them is now 40 and the other's 38, and neither of them did at the time. And I started to think about this topic of ownership, and happened to come across a book that I'll point out a bit later, because I've got a great pile of books here, and every so often we flag up a book or two that people might be interested in, or a YouTube clip or whatever. And the book was Who Owns England? I don't know if you've come across this book, but I'll mention it again later. And then there was another one that went with it called The Book of Trespass by a guy called Nick Hayes. And I read these books and thoughts were flowing through me in such a way that I had to go deeper into the topic, and ended up teaching a little course when I first came to Cornwall 5 years ago for about 6 weeks on the kind of theology of land. So I just got fascinated with it. So that's the context, and I was asking myself questions like, land is at the heart of everything, so it gets used for some strange things sometimes. We take fossil fuels out of it, we deforest it, and in some cases we forest it, we turn it into grouse moors, and we dispossess. Sometimes people get dispossessed from it and become refugees. We grow our food on it. Sometimes we think it's an individual thing to own it, and sometimes communities own land, like the Isle of Egg and the west coast of Scotland. And somehow we're responsible, whatever system we decide to put together for land, we are kind of responsible for it. So there were just all these ideas going through my head. And as we started doing River Thoughts, I thought, I need to open this topic out for a wider audience. So the guests we have today, we've got Peter. He's over there if he's on the screen, again, just to be troublesome as he usually is, and devil's advocate and whatever. But on top of that, we've got two other guests today, Dawn, who's going to introduce herself in a minute, and Mark. And I am delighted they're here. They do have a connection with the topic of land, and so I might get them to say something about that as we go along. So can I ask you just to... We won't ask Peter. He's been on these videos before, and people can find out about him. In fact, this last week, his biography went out on the videos. So if you want to find out about that guy, you've got to look at last week's. So Dawn, 1 minute on who you are.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, so my name is Dawn. I've been in Cornwall now for about 10 years. I work for a charity called Key Helen Trust.
Yeah.
We have 16 acres of land where we support adults and young people with additional needs through horticultural and sort of associated tasks.
Yeah.
I'm also a woman of faith, although, little disclaimer, the charity I work for is a non-faith-based charity. So a lot of my sort of practical knowledge is sort of from spending 10 years with a charity, but any sort of faith-based sort of discussion is a representation of my views only. But yes, I have been a fairly sort of nature-obsessed person my entire life, and in my personal life as well, my sort of daily activities.
Do you want to tell us why there's a bunch of flowers between you and Mark?
Yes, so flower growing is something I do at work and also at home as well, and it's quite an important usage of land commercially and personally as well.
Brilliant.
So I just want to bring a little bit of what I do.
Looks
with
fantastic.
me.
I should do it more often, shouldn't I?
Yeah.
Well, but there'll be more, I'm sure. I mean, I've already found out something about you I didn't know, which is you'd only been in Cornwall for 10 years. So we might explore that a bit more. I don't know. We're going to talk a little bit about the importance of place, or maybe not the importance of place. Mark, introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm Mark. You've already introduced me that way. Mark Selwood. My wife and I, Jo, run a small holding in the outskirts of Redruth. So Camborne folk, please forgive me.
We'll cope.
It's a 15-acre site. We've got a mixed bag of animals on it at the moment: pigs, cows, goats, obligatory chickens, large veg patch, and we also run a DIY livery yard from there. On top of that, we run the whole place as a community interest company, Lowenna Community Interest Company. For you Cornish folk out there, Lowenna just means joy, and it's taken from Isaiah 61, oil of joy rather than a sadness stuff. And for that thing, it's basically we're providing therapeutic work experience, I think the phrase might be, for people who have needs. So we've had people up there who are recovering from addictions, we've had people recovering from mental health issues, and also people who are learning to cope with learning difficulties and that sort of stuff. So yeah, that's us. We've been there for now 22 years.
Yeah. I know it's a fair while, because it's 12 years ago since I first met you. Thank you both for that. And I have to say that although I wasn't sure, I was thinking, who do I ask to be in on this topic? I cannot think of better people to be in on the sorts of things I want to grapple with. So brilliant for that. Okay, I'm going to throw in a real curved ball. Is it curved ball? Square curved ball. Curved ball to this one, in a way, because I'm going to ask you who you think this quote is from. You're not allowed to say, because you've heard it before. It actually went out on one of the very short videos back in March, I think it was. But for a very good reason, I want to give you this quote. So maybe I'll get you to guess, see if you think you know who it might be. The quote goes, "No generation has a freehold on this earth. All we have is a life tenancy with a full repairing lease."
Good grief, I've no idea.
A politician.
Oh, okay.
And one that wasn't really, and still isn't, high in my regard in lots of ways.
Gordon Brown.
It was Margaret Thatcher.
Margaret Thatcher.
Okay, interesting.
So I'll say it again. No generation has a freehold on this earth. All we have is a life tenancy with a full repairing lease. What do you think about that as a statement? And Peter, you're allowed to comment on this, just not say who that was initially. So, what do you think? Oh. Do you agree or don't agree? Do we have a freehold? Do we have a life tenancy? Are we supposed to repair it? Or anything?
I guess it fits in with one of the things that I've been thinking about over the last week since you asked me to do this.
Yeah.
And it's actually that we are responsible. We're responsible for the plot of land that we have been given. Do we own it? I don't feel that I own our small holding. Where we are tenants. I guess that fits in with that. But we are also in charge of it. It's that Genesis 1 thing, isn't it? That actually, that we, God put us in charge. I think the word is rule or have dominion over anything else. But under Him, therefore, we're responsible back to Him again. And that parable of the talents that Jesus.
And yet, in the sense society, accepts that presumably you own your 15
Mm-hmm.
acres in a legal
Yep,
document, and through inheritance or whatever, Dawn, you own something. Yeah, is that right?
Yeah, I've got a slightly larger than average garden, I would say.
Yeah, well, so have I.
And then the charity I work for, we don't actually own the land. It is rented from the council, which is interesting. And certainly there are views on both sides of the fence whether that is a good thing for us or whether we would benefit from owning that land.
Interesting. Got any thoughts on this, Peter? You're the person here who doesn't own. Is that right, or am I wrong there?
I have 2 rooms in my parents' house. I have my room, and then I have my old sister's room where I watch TV. So I'm living with parents. If you imagine the options of landowner, tenant, living with parents,
Yeah.
type thing. But it's an interesting discussion.
And also because your brother's just moved into a new place, hasn't he?
Yeah, and
that's not owned, is it? And
the thing that confuses me, people say they own a house when they've got a mortgage on it.
Yes, I'm in that category. I say I own a house, but actually, mine's mortgaged. And interesting on the word sort of using tenancy. So a very good friend of mine who is in his late 80s now, he's been on a wonderful patch of land since 82, I think. And he's always refers to himself as the custodian,
Right.
which I think is a lovely way of saying that. And he's very conscious about the sort of managing the land and leaving it better than it was. And because he considers himself a custodian, and he also appreciates the privilege of legally owning, I think it's about 20 acres, he's very generous with that land. And again, I live in a very unique community where we're surrounded by quite a few different people with legal ownership over X amount of acres who are all very generous with that land. And I use that land in various ways. And it's very special.
It's interesting, some of the thoughts coming out from both of you, actually. Well, in lots of ways from what you're saying in your circumstances as well. And yet, if you go back historically, I'm going to do a little bit of a book push here, or just to mention some. I'm reading at the moment a book by a guy called Simon Winchester. I don't know if you can get it on the camera, Peter. It's called Land: How the Hunger for Ownership Shaped the Modern World. And because, of course, historically, ownership was totally different. In fact, at one point there was a lot of common land, and there wasn't much owned land.
It was only the enclosures, wasn't it, that actually...
And then we'll get to this in a minute, but there was also the clearances from land, which is not just reference to Scotland, but actually we could go further. A book that's really helpful, and I'm going to quote from it later, is a book called A Hebridean Journey, Love of Country by Madeline Bunting. And this was a book that really impacted me. It's a story of the Hebrides, but the quotes in it are just phenomenal about land. So I'm just mentioning those because one of the things that comes out in the Hebridean one is the significance of what's called a storied place. So to give an idea, you've already mentioned actually the story of Cahelland and the fact that it's council land and also other bits of land. You, Mark, have already said that you've got a story. You've been there for 22 years on 15 acres. And so there's something about, there's a story behind the places that we occupy or use. And I've just got this thought in my head. And when I was investigating this, I lived at the time in Skelmersdale in Lancashire. But I come from Southampton, and I spent 40 years in Southampton. I spent 2 years in London. I spent 20 years in Lancashire, and now I'm over 5 years in Cornwall. So have I got a storied place, or is it just for certain times in my life? At times I owned, at times I was with parents, at times I was, and part of me wishes that I still had a story where I was brought up. Now, if there was another person I was wondering who was going to come tonight, Connor, and he can't make it, but it's interesting that he is rooted in the community in the north that his family live in, and he misses it a lot, I know. And and he's from, there's a base of the family in Middlesbrough, and then they lived in York for a long part of his life, and he's very rooted there, whereas I'm much less so with where I was originally born. So I wonder what any of you thought about the fact that you're in a particular place, and how important do you think the story of you or the story of the place is to this whole idea of how we use land?
Oh, that's really interesting. I'm not a home bird at all, so I've chosen not to have children. I chose very young age, but I was going to move out as soon as I could. Was raised in a wonderful family, very loving, but I was like, I'm out of here.
Right.
Home is where I am at that moment.
Okay, interesting.
And
it is for me in a way.
Yeah, and I have no issues with living far away from family.
Yep.
And I find I build community where I am, and my life is more a series of chapters. One of those chapters was in London. It was a short chapter, but certainly I find I place myself in places where land, as in open, non-built up land, forms part of my lifestyle.
Yeah, so the land is rooted. Well, you're rooted wherever the land roots, in a sense.
Yeah.
Where you're put on a piece of land.
Yeah, essentially, yeah. But I tend to be able to sort of drift to the next patch.
But do you feel that for a certain length of time you are? I mean, you've been in Cornwall 10 years.
Yes.
So is Cornwall feeling home at the moment still?
It does at the moment. Yeah. I still get a lot of richness from it. Will we move? I don't know.
I mean, if you move, will you miss it? It's all these kind of feelings of
how
much are you embedded or not, kind of thinking.
Yeah, I think different.
I'm not sure there's an actual answer to it.
Yeah, I think different types of land give you different richness, don't they?
Totally, but I'm actually just thinking, if we're comfortable in ourselves, then actually we will find the story of the place that we happen to be there at the moment, and know that we are also then part of that story for no matter how long or how short. I mean, I grew up down here. I grew up in Redruth. My mum lives next door to me, doesn't she? But I spent 20 years away out of the county, living in Birmingham. But whilst I was in Birmingham, I was part of the story in Birmingham.
Yeah.
We moved back down. I've been regrafted into the story of Redruth and Camborne and this area again. I think that if we live in our heads elsewhere, always longing to be back where we were, then actually we have never actually arrived where we are physically at this moment.
And I think I very much enjoy living in the moment, but living in the moment with what I am surrounded with. And I think that's why my connection to land is not land that is built up like a city. I struggle with a man-made landscape.
You like a natural one.
I like a natural landscape, and that comes down to like tiny landscapes, whether I'm out spearfishing and I'm taking a moment to appreciate a tiny underwater landscape with a tiny little whelk on it or something, or whether that's just looking at a tiny bit of moss out in a woodland somewhere, or you're on a cliff top somewhere and you're in this vast landscape.
Vast view.
And so I suppose in that sense, on a personal, emotional level, land is, it gives me an awful lot. But
that ties in with something that you said before the camera started rolling about trying to live a thankful life. That actually you're looking for something of beauty, something of worth in the environment.
Yeah.
In your case.
100%.
Yeah.
Do you feel rooted in Cornwall, Peter?
I was just thinking, I feel a sense of home with the people I'm with. So if they were in Devon, I'd be in Devon. I'm not a big person on associating meaning with a certain place.
Yeah, right, okay.
Even though I've been in Cornwall my whole life. And I think you can tell that most because we have a friend called Reese.
Yeah.
and we've both been in Cornwall our whole lives, but he's Cornish and I'm not, because my parents are from elsewhere and I don't feel Cornish even though I'm technically Cornish.
Yeah, okay.
So I think family makes you feel if you're rooted somewhere.
I am going to come back a little bit to the idea of the people and whether you see yourself with a people, a community, or whether the land is important to you. And there's another little nuance I could put on that in a minute. So yeah, interesting. What about this? I've got this little quote down here. So these are some of the slides I used previously when I was doing this. But it says this: if land is to be cared for in sustainable ways, you cannot make new decisions divorced from history or future. So if we're going to look after what we've got, whether it's Cahelland, your plot of land, my plot of land, or whatever, how much does it matter to you? Do you think that's a valid statement about the history of the place or the future of the place? You know?
Well, I think it's amusing, isn't it, that we give the title this regenerative farming, and you go thinking like, actually, that's farming before heavy machinery. There's nothing new in that.
Yeah.
That is actually looking back to what we can learn from
history.
From
Industrial revolution.
farming,
Yeah,
at
the Industrial
least.
Revolution.
Yeah.
I think now we're paying the consequences for the Industrial Revolution, because actually so many things from that point we've gone so far, and actually now we're realising that supermarkets have a massive impact worldwide, and it's not a good one.
Yeah.
You know, huge farming machinery, it doesn't have a good impact. Social media, even though I know this is going out on the old social media, so I think there's so many things, and I think a lot of these things which are coming back into discussion, becoming back into fashion, they all hark back before Industrial Revolution, and I think that's really important.
And lots of farmers that I've spoken to, and people who run small holdings and whatnot, they do have an eye always on the future, because mostly they're wanting to see their land improved for the future. Now, how it's improved might vary.
Yeah.
Some might have it with the business mind on, of actually like, how can we squeeze more out of this land? Some might have the opposite one, which is actually, how can we leave this land better, more fruitful, more diverse afterwards? But there is frequently within people who are managing land are looking forward. I'm not sure always that we're doing much about the looking back, apart from when we adopt something like regenerative farming.
Of course, you sometimes get situations where people, if you go and try and mess with what's been there, the people of a community might well rail big time against certain decisions if the history of the place is not taken into account and what happens next. Sometimes with good reason and sometimes less so.
Absolutely.
Change is always a really interesting one. I mean, if you want to get a community up in arms, do a change, and even if that change could be positive,
absolutely,
just the fact that it's a change.
Absolutely. What we're going to do with this, I've got a whole host of things here, but I'm very conscious we've been going for about 20 minutes, and so I'm going to take a break and say we're going to carry on with this discussion and put part 2 out in a moment, but we're going to film it now for a month later. So we're going to say cheerio on this one, and we'll see you in a moment. Thanks, Peter.
Thank you.